Tammy Sllayton had grown used to the camera lights, the noisy crews, and the long days of filming, but nothing ever prepared her for the moments when life itself turned into a storyline she couldn't control. Season 8 was supposed to be a fresh beginning, but instead, the first teaser opened with something she had never expected to confess publicly. She and her sister Amy were drifting apart. Tammy sat in the interview chair, the room dim except for the bright spotlight on her face. She hesitated before speaking, her eyes shifting downward, searching for the right words. "She ought to be my closest friend," she finally whispered. The microphones picked up the tremble in her voice, not anger, not bitterness, but a quiet kind of hurt she rarely let the world see. The screen cut sharply to family chaos, the kind of chaos only the Sllayton family could generate. Chris Combs stood in the middle of his kitchen, waving his phone dramatically. "Every other word in the family group chat is an F-bomb," he said, rubbing his forehead. He wasn't wrong. Tension had boiled so high that even texting felt like walking on burning gravel. "Families are supposed to pull together," he added, almost pleading with the universe. But no one seemed ready to pull anything except each other's nerves. Amy, on the other hand, had sparks in her eyes, the kind of sparks that came only when she felt cornered. She crossed her arms tightly, shaking her head at Chris's attempt to mediate. "I'm not going to sit here and have you feed me this bologna when I don't even like bologna," she snapped, firing off the sentence like a slingshot. She didn't raise her voice, but her words hit just as hard. Tammy didn't hold back either. When Chris tried to reason with her, she shot back, "If Amy keeps her mouth shut, so would I." The words hung in the air, thick and cold. Everyone knew Tammy could be blunt, but this time, her tone wasn't just sharp, it was wounded. And beneath the surface, the real reasons behind their crumbling relationship simmered like a pot ready to boil over. Amy's marriage to Brian Leavorn, Tammy's comments about her parenting skills, and the shadows of old arguments still echoing from the past, none of it had been resolved. Not truly. Not in the way sisters should resolve things. Amy and her ex-husband Michael shared 2 little boys, Gage and Glenn, 5 and 3. Anyone who knew Amy knew her entire world revolved around them. But pressure had been tugging at the edges of her life like loose threads waiting to unravel. Planning a wedding on top of raising 2 kids only added more weight to her already heavy shoulders. "The wedding is in 6 months," Amy said in the trailer, rolling her eyes dramatically. "The location must be haunted because it's a symbol of our love." Her tone was dripping with sarcasm, her frustration showing through the cracks of her humor. "Neither Queen Tammy nor my family want anything to do with it," she added, and though she tried to laugh it off, it still stung. Then came the line that shook fans the most, the one that replayed endlessly online, the one that instantly became the center of the Season 8 discussion. Tammy, in a separate clip, called Amy a deadbeat mom. It hit like a punch straight to the heart. Amy's reaction came moments later, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I can't put up with her nasty behavior anymore. I'm done." Her voice broke, the emotion pouring out in a way she couldn't hide even if she tried. Since the show began back in 2020, the sisters had survived arguments, surgeries, setbacks, and victories. They'd stood by each other through nearly 1,000 pounds of combined weight in Season 1, Tammy at 608 pounds and Amy at 406. Their journey had been one of sweat, tears, fear, pride, and transformation. In the years since, Tammy shed over 500 pounds. Amy lost nearly 200. Tammy even underwent skin removal surgery, a massive, life-changing step showcased in Season 7. Their achievements should have brought them closer. But life rarely follows the script people want. Now, despite their fractured relationship, both sisters were stepping into major new chapters. Tammy's engagement to Andrea Dalton, Amy's October wedding to Brian, and both women trying to rebuild their identities after years of fighting for their lives. And that was only the beginning of the story. Season 8 wasn't just shaping up to be dramatic. It was becoming the rawest, most emotional, most unpredictable chapter the Sllayton sisters had ever faced. As filming resumed, the familiar hum of production lights and microphones filled the Sllayton family's world once again, but something had shifted on a deeper level. Tammy moved through her days with a new kind of steadiness, no longer fighting against every suggestion or spiraling into the frustration that used to consume her. Instead, she carried herself with a quiet determination that surprised even the crew members who had watched her for years. Every morning began with the sound of her wheelchair rolling across the living room floor, followed by the slow but consistent effort it took for her to stand, balance, and take a few steps. They were small, sometimes shaky, but they were steps she never thought she would take again. Amy watched all of this with a mixture of pride and exhaustion. Being a mom of 2 little boys while filming a full reality series was already overwhelming, but adding emotional stress on top of it created moments where she just wanted to hide from the world for a few minutes. Her house was loud, chaotic, cluttered, and filled with toys, sticky handprints, and the kind of mess that only toddlers could create. Still, she made time to check on Tammy every day, whether through a call, a video chat, or stopping by with the boys to brighten her sister's mood. Their bond had been through fire, years of fighting, crying, arguing, and reconciliation, but every season proved how deeply they depended on each other. Meanwhile, Chris took on a new role behind the scenes, becoming the family's unofficial anchor. His humor made the hard moments easier, and his constant reminders about discipline, diet, and progress kept everyone grounded. He often joked that he had turned into the family coach without getting paid for it, but there was pride behind his words. Watching Tammy walk again, watching her breathe without machines, watching her choose herself every single day, it was the kind of victory he never expected to see when the show first began. Production meetings grew more intense as footage rolled in from each family member. TLC executives were stunned by how different this season felt. It wasn't just weight loss anymore. It was transformation on every level. There were storylines unfolding that none of the producers had anticipated, old relationships resurfacing, unexpected medical updates, and emotional breakthroughs that would redefine the entire direction of the show. More than once, staff members left editing sessions teary-eyed, unable to fully process how far these siblings had come. As the days passed, the pressure of filming combined with the pressure of real life created a storm that everyone had to navigate. Amy faced a decision that she had been quietly avoiding for months, one that had the potential to change her home, her marriage, and her stability. Tammy, on the other hand, was preparing for a medical review that could either confirm her progress or reveal complications that might pull her back into danger. And Chris found himself stepping into a protective older brother role more intensely than ever, especially as rumors, online criticism, and social media noise began to pick up around the family's private struggles. Every night, when the cameras turned off and the bright production lights went dark, the Sllayton family returned to being simply human, tired, hopeful, afraid, excited, and uncertain. And little did they know, the next chapter of filming would push them all into moments more dramatic and more emotional than anything they had experienced on screen so far. When the next week of filming began, everything around the Sllayton family felt heavier, like the air itself was bracing for the turning point that was coming. Tammy woke up earlier than usual, staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, trying to recognize the woman looking back at her. For so many years, mirrors had felt like enemies, constant reminders of her pain, failures, and fear. But now, for the first time in forever, she leaned closer, studying her face, her jawline. The way her eyes seemed brighter. She wasn't where she wanted to be yet, but she wasn't who she used to be either. Change had finally taken root, and she wasn't going to let anyone or anything pull it away from her. Her upcoming doctor's appointment weighed heavily on her mind. This wasn't just any checkup. This was the one that would determine whether her body was truly healing or whether hidden dangers still lurked beneath the surface. Oxygen levels, blood pressure, mobility, everything she had fought for over the last year would be evaluated. The stakes were enormous, and even though she tried to stay calm for the cameras, her hands trembled slightly when she thought about the possibility of a setback. She didn't say it out loud, but deep down, she was terrified of hearing bad news. On the other side of town, Amy struggled with her own battles. Her boys were growing fast, and the responsibility felt like a tidal wave she couldn't outrun. She loved them fiercely, but the long nights, The tantrums, the endless laundry, and the emotional weight of her crumbling marriage drained her energy day after day. She tried to smile during filming, tried to keep her voice upbeat, tried to pretend everything was fine, but the truth was that she was barely holding herself together. She missed the version of her life where things felt simple. She missed feeling stable. And she missed the sense of safety she used to rely on before everything began falling apart. Still, the relationship between the sisters continued to grow stronger. One evening, after a long day of filming, Amy drove over to Tammy's place. She didn't bring the boys this time, just herself. When Tammy opened the door, she immediately noticed the exhaustion written across her sister's face. Without saying a word, they sat together on the couch, close enough for their shoulders to touch, the room dim except for the soft glow of a lamp. They talked quietly about life, about fear, about the pressure of being watched by millions, and the constant expectation to be strong even when they felt weak. Tammy reached over, squeezed Amy's hand, and whispered, "We've been through hell before. We're still here. We're still fighting." The moment was raw, genuine, and unfiltered, exactly the kind of scene producers wish they could capture, but some parts of the sisters' lives weren't meant for cameras. Some moments were just for them. Meanwhile, Chris was dealing with something he hadn't shared with his sisters yet. He had his own medical concerns, a nagging pain he kept brushing off, fatigue he blamed on work, and numbers from a recent checkup that didn't look as good as he pretended. He didn't want to worry Tammy or Amy, especially when both of them were carrying so much already, so he stayed quiet. But late at night, when the house was silent, he found himself staring at the ceiling, wondering if he had been ignoring his own warnings for too long. As filming continued, tension began to grow beneath the surface of every storyline. Each family member was carrying something heavy, something unspoken. And the closer they moved toward the mid-season climax, the clearer it became that all of these threads, Tammy's medical review, Amy's crumbling relationship, Chris's secret health scare, were on a direct collision course. The next days would bring revelations none of them were prepared for. The morning of Tammy's appointment arrived with an uneasy stillness, the kind that settles before a storm. She sat on the edge of her bed, dressed and ready, but unable to shake the mixture of fear and hope swirling inside her. For so long, doctor visits were filled with disappointment, numbers climbing higher, warnings growing sharper, doctors questioning whether she'd make it another year. But now, things were different. Her body told her things had changed. She could feel it when she walked, when she breathed, when she woke up without the heaviness that used to anchor her in place. Still, she couldn't convince herself to relax. The shadows of her past struggles clung tightly, whispering doubts. The production van pulled up outside, and the familiar knock came at her door. The crew greeted her warmly, sensing her nerves, but not wanting to push. As she settled into the van, she glanced out the window, watching the small Kentucky streets pass by. Every corner held a memory, some painful, some hopeful, but all part of the journey that had led her here. She took a deep breath, letting the cool air calm her trembling hands. Meanwhile, Amy was racing against the chaos of her morning. The house buzzed with the sound of her boys running, yelling, playing, completely unaware of the emotional storm inside their mother. She tried to keep things normal, got them dressed, fed them breakfast, packed their bags. But her heart kept drifting back to Tammy, worrying about what news her sister might receive. She wanted to be there in person, but her own life had become too complicated. Still, she kept her phone close, ready to answer the moment Tammy called. At the doctor's office, Tammy was greeted with smiles that she didn't expect. Nurses who had seen her in her darkest moments were now seeing a woman transformed, not only in size but in spirit. "You look amazing, Tammy," one of them said softly, and Tammy's eyes welled up. It had been so long since she felt proud of herself, long since she believed she deserved encouragement. When the doctor walked into the room, clipboard in hand, Tammy's heart raced. The exam began quietly, measurements, blood work review, mobility assessment, oxygen levels. Every minute stretched longer than the last, the silence thick enough to make her breath catch. The doctor studied the numbers carefully, eyebrows lifting with genuine surprise. "Tammy," he finally said, turning toward her, "this is the best progress you've ever had." She blinked, unsure if she heard correctly. Her blood pressure was stable. Her oxygen levels were normal, without support. Her mobility had improved beyond the expectations set for this stage. The numbers weren't just good. They were astounding. Tammy covered her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks. For years, she had been defined by decline, by warnings, by fear. Now, for the first time in her adult life, a doctor was telling her she was winning. Word of her results spread quickly through the production team. Cameras shifted, schedules rearranged. They knew they were witnessing history for the show. Tammy, emotional and overwhelmed, stepped outside to let the sunlight touch her face. She felt lighter, not just physically but emotionally, spiritually. The world around her suddenly seemed bigger, brighter, more possible. Across town, Chris received the text from production before Tammy could even call. He excused himself from work, stepped outside, and wiped a tear from his eye. He wanted to cheer, to shout, to hug his sister so tight she'd complain about it. Instead, he sent her a simple message: "I'm proud of you. More than you know." But beneath his joy, his own worries gnawed at him. His next checkup was soon, and he was afraid the news he'd get wouldn't be as hopeful. And Amy, when the phone finally rang, collapsed onto her couch and cried silently, overwhelmed with pride and relief. In a season where her own life felt like it was slipping through her fingers, Tammy's victory became a small anchor, something bright to hold on to. What none of them realized yet was that Tammy's breakthrough would set off a chain reaction, one that would reshape the entire direction of their season and reveal meanings they weren't prepared to confront. The days following Tammy's breakthrough appointment unfolded like a wave of quiet celebration. Fans didn't know yet, the episode wouldn't air for months, but inside the Sllayton family, the energy had shifted. Tammy walked a little taller, laughed a little louder, and moved with a confidence she hadn't felt in years. Every step she took around her home reminded her of the years she spent trapped in her own body, relying on machines and assistants simply to survive. Now she could stand on her own, walk on her own, breathe on her own. These changes weren't just physical. They were victories that rewrote the story she'd been living for so long. But with progress came pressure. Production sensed the momentum and threw themselves into capturing every detail, every emotion, every raw moment of vulnerability. Producers asked Tammy to revisit old memories and confront parts of her past she had tried to bury. They wanted scenes that showed the contrast between who she was and who she was becoming. Tammy understood. They were making a show, but reliving those dark times wasn't easy. Some nights, she cried after filming stopped, feeling exposed in a way she wasn't sure she was ready for. At Amy's house, life continued at its chaotic pace. Her boys filled every corner with noise, toys, and movement. She adored them, but motherhood was relentless, and her personal life was becoming harder to navigate. Arguments that used to feel small now felt unbearable. She tried to hide her frustration from the cameras, choosing to focus on the children or her sister's triumphs. But when the crew packed up and left at the end of each day, she found herself sitting alone in the quiet, staring at her phone, wondering how her life had drifted so far from where she thought it would be. Chris, meanwhile, tried to keep things lighthearted. He filmed scenes with jokes, cooking segments, goofy commentary, anything to keep the mood up. But underneath the humor, he was struggling. His own health concerns lingered in his mind like an unfinished sentence. He dreaded the upcoming appointment he hadn't told anyone about. He didn't want to steal Tammy's spotlight or add to Amy's stress, so he kept his worries tucked away behind his usual confidence. But late at night, when he sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee in front of him, he couldn't ignore the fear creeping in. As filming progressed, producers decided to arrange a family gathering, a moment to bring everyone together, celebrate Tammy's progress, and capture the sibling bond that fans loved so deeply. When the day arrived, the house filled with the smell of food, laughter bouncing off the walls, the kids running between adults as the cameras rolled. Tammy sat in her wheelchair, though she didn't always need it, and watched her family move around her with a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. For so many years, gatherings like this were overshadowed by worry about her health. Now, for once, the air felt lighter. Amy hugged her sister tightly when she walked in the door. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered into Tammy's shoulder, and Tammy felt her throat tighten. For a moment, they were just two sisters trying to survive the world, leaning on each other in ways they never fully admitted. Chris arrived late, carrying bags of food and joking loudly, but Tammy noticed something different in his eyes. A flicker of worry, a heaviness he tried to mask. She didn't push him, not tonight. Tonight was supposed to be happy. The cameras captured everything, the smiles, the teasing, the inside jokes that only siblings understood. But they didn't catch the quiet glances exchanged when someone's laughter faded too quickly. They didn't capture the way Amy stepped outside for a moment, wiping away tears she couldn't explain. They didn't see Chris pause in the hallway, hand on the wall, catching his breath before returning to the kitchen. The family was stronger than ever, but each of them was carrying something heavy, something hidden. And although they didn't realize it yet, the balance of their world was about to shift again, pulling their stories into darker, deeper territory as the season unfolded. In the days after the family gathering, life settled into a deceptive calm, one of those quiet stretches where everything seems steady on the surface, but underneath, pressure is slowly building. Tammy spent more time practicing her walking, pushing herself a little further each day. Every step reminded her how far she had come, but also how far she still had to go. Progress wasn't a straight line, and some mornings she woke up stiff, tired, or discouraged. Still, she refused to slip backward. She had tasted freedom, real freedom, and she wasn't going to lose it. One afternoon, with the cameras rolling, Tammy decided to attempt something she hadn't done in years: cook a full meal standing up. The crew watched closely, ready to jump in if she needed help, but she surprised them. She moved slowly but steadily, gripping the counter when she needed support, stirring the pot with determination etched across her face. When she finally plated the meal and sat down to eat, tears filled her eyes. It wasn't about the food, it was about reclaiming a part of herself she thought she'd lost forever. But while Tammy was rediscovering her strength, Amy was unraveling quietly. She tried to keep her struggles hidden, especially when the cameras were around, but the cracks were becoming harder to cover. Filming long days while raising two boys and dealing with emotional turmoil at home was taking its toll. Her laughter felt forced, her smiles strained, and the exhaustion she pushed through every day became impossible to ignore. She found herself snapping more easily, retreating into silence when the pressure grew too much. The production crew noticed. They filmed carefully, respectfully, sensing the shift in her energy. When she needed space, they gave it to her. But the world of reality TV never truly pauses, and Amy knew she couldn't keep pretending forever. One evening, after putting the boys to bed, she sat at her kitchen table staring at her phone. Messages she didn't want to open, decisions she didn't want to make, and the weight of a life she no longer recognized pressed heavily on her chest. She wanted to be strong, for her sons, for Tammy, for herself, but strength was slipping through her fingers like water she couldn't hold on to. Meanwhile, Chris prepared silently for his upcoming appointment. He didn't joke about it, didn't mention it to his wife, and certainly didn't tell his sisters. Fear clung to him in a way he couldn't ignore anymore. The symptoms he hoped were temporary hadn't gone away, and every time he felt that familiar pain or wave of fatigue, anxiety twisted inside him. The night before his appointment, he lay awake staring at the ceiling. His house was quiet, the kind of silence that made every thought louder. He imagined the worst, imagined what it would mean for his family, imagined telling his sisters, especially Tammy, who had just begun to feel hope again. He didn't want to burden them. He didn't want to break their moment of peace. The next morning, he got into his truck before the sun came up, driving alone to the clinic. No cameras, no crew, no family. Just him and the heavy truth he might be about to face. As the day unfolded, production focused on Tammy, who was having one of her best weeks since filming started. She laughed easily, filmed willingly, and shared stories she used to avoid. The crew captured every moment, thrilled by her transformation. But beneath the excitement of Tammy's progress, an unspoken tension hovered around the edges of the family. Amy's emotional exhaustion and Chris's hidden fear pulsed beneath the surface, unseen by viewers, but deeply felt by those behind the scenes. And as the season moved forward, the Sllayton siblings were unknowingly stepping toward one of the most emotional turning points the show had ever seen, one that would shake the family, test their strength, and force them to face the reality they had all been trying to ignore. Chris returned from his appointment later that afternoon, the weight of the doctor's words pressing on his shoulders like invisible cement. He shut the truck door gently, almost cautiously, as if moving too quickly might cause everything inside him to crumble. The house was empty, his wife at work, the kids at school, giving him no distraction, no noise to drown out the echo of the diagnosis he wasn't prepared to face. He sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, hands clasped as if he were praying, though he didn't know what for. The doctor had been kind, patient, and thorough, but none of that softened the truth. He needed more tests. Something wasn't right. Something was off in his blood work, in his scans, in signs he'd been ignoring for months. The uncertainty was worse than knowing. It gnawed at him, digging deeper every minute. But he couldn't tell Tammy, not yet. She had finally reached a place of confidence and peace he hadn't seen in her in years. And Amy, she was on the edge of breaking. He couldn't add his fears to the pile she was already carrying. So he sat there, letting the silence settle around him, letting the fear simmer, letting the reality sink into his bones. Meanwhile, across town, Tammy was in front of her mirror trying on outfits for her job interview at the animal shelter. The excitement on her face was unmistakable. She held up shirts one by one, turning sideways, smiling at her reflection with an energy she hadn't felt since she was a teenager. She even filmed a short segment for the show, proudly explaining why she wanted the job. "Animals don't judge," she said softly. "They don't care how I look, how big I am, or how long it took me to get better. They just want love, and I got a lot of that to give." The crew loved the moment. It felt pure, hopeful, exactly the kind of scene viewers would root for. Tammy's transformation wasn't just physical anymore. It was emotional, spiritual. She was rebuilding her life piece by piece, discovering new versions of herself she didn't know existed. But Amy was nowhere near that emotional clarity. She was sitting in her bedroom with the curtains half drawn, scrolling through messages she didn't want to answer. Fans asking for updates. Producers asking for confirmations. Her ex asking about the boys' schedule. Her mind felt cluttered, tangled in 100 directions. She longed for a moment of peace, but every time she tried to breathe, anxiety tightened around her ribs. She picked up her phone, considered calling Tammy, but stopped. Her sister deserved good news, not another dose of stress. She considered calling Chris, but she knew he was dealing with things too. They all were, in their own quiet ways. So instead, she tucked the phone under her leg, leaned back, and tried to steady her breathing. Hours later, the family group chat lit up as Tammy proudly shared a picture of herself in her interview outfit. The chat exploded with reactions, Amanda teasing her, Misty sending heart emojis, the nieces cheering her on. Chris typed a supportive message, forcing himself to sound upbeat even though his hands were shaking. Amy stared at the messages for a long time before typing. "You look beautiful, sis. You're gonna crush it. Proud of you." Tammy replied instantly, with a voice note full of giggles and excitement. Hearing her sister so happy made Amy smile through her exhaustion. It was moments like this that kept her going. But just as the warmth settled in, there was a knock at Amy's door, unexpected, firm, and far too early for any family member to visit. Her heartbeat quickened as she walked toward the living room, wiping her eyes, trying to compose herself. When she opened the door, a production assistant stood there holding an envelope. "Amy, this came from the network," he said gently. "They wanted you to have it before we start filming tomorrow." Her stomach dropped. She took the envelope with trembling fingers. The assistant gave her a sympathetic look before walking away. Inside, she unfolded the letter, and her breathing hitched as her eyes moved down the page. It wasn't a script. It wasn't a schedule. It was a notice. A warning. A reminder that her legal issues were now affecting the show. And the network wanted answers. Real answers. The weight of it settled over her like a storm cloud, dark and heavy. Tomorrow, she would have to face not just her family but the cameras, the world, the consequences she had been trying to hide. And across town, Tammy was laying out her interview clothes with a smile, while Chris sat alone in the dark. 3 siblings. 3 different storms. All heading toward the same collision. Morning crept over Dixon with a soft, hazy light, the kind that made the whole town look quiet and slow. But inside Amy's house, nothing felt slow. Her thoughts were racing faster than her heartbeat. She barely slept after reading the letter from the network. It lay on the coffee table now, its crisp edges mocking her with every glance she took. She kept pacing back and forth, rubbing her hands together, her mind tangled in fear and what-ifs. Her boys were eating cereal at the kitchen counter, blissfully unaware of the weight hanging over their mother. Gage talked about dinosaurs between mouthfuls. Glenn babbled at a toy truck. Their innocence gave Amy a moment of calm, brief, fragile. She kissed both their heads, inhaling that soft baby scent she wished she could bottle up and use like medicine. Her kids grounded her. They always had. But today, even their laughter couldn't drown out the anxiety. Meanwhile, Tammy was already awake, dressed, and sitting by the window, practicing answers for her interview. She kept whispering them under her breath. I want this job because I want to help animals. I've been working on myself mentally and physically. I'm ready for responsibility. She reheated her coffee 3 times because she kept getting distracted imagining what it would feel like to get the job. Something stable. Something hers. A reason to wake up excited each morning. She had come so far, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and today felt like the next step in that new life. She glanced at her phone. No text from Amy. No update. Normally, her sister would have sent her a picture of her outfit or a goofy voice memo hyping her up. Tammy frowned a little. Something about the silence felt wrong. But she took a deep breath and forced herself to stay positive. She didn't want anything messing with her focus. Across town, Chris was still in bed, staring at the ceiling. The doctor's words played over and over in his head like a scratched record. He needed more tests. They found something unusual. Nothing was confirmed yet, but the uncertainty was its own kind of fear. He didn't want to look sick, didn't want to sound scared. She stared out the window, her heart fluttering with excitement and nerves. She wasn't used to feeling hopeful. Hope had always felt like a luxury. But now, it felt like part of her. Andrea glanced over. You ready? Tammy smiled softly. Yeah, I think I am. She wasn't ready for everything. Not the drama, not the fighting, not the storm brewing in the background with her sister. But she was ready for this piece of her future. The shelter building came into view, small, simple, but full of life. Dogs barked from the yard. Cats lounged in sunlit rooms. A large sign read Kenton County Animal Care, Volunteers Welcome. Tammy's heart swelled. Inside, a woman with kind eyes greeted her. You must be Tammy. We've heard about your journey. Welcome. Tammy's cheeks flushed with pride. Thank you for having me. As she followed the staff through the hallway, dogs wagging their tails at her, a tiny moment of peace washed over her. She felt wanted, valued, understood. Back at Amy's house, the interview had wrapped, and her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. She checked her phone again, still nothing from Tammy. She typed out a message twice and deleted it both times. Finally, she wrote, How'd it go today? Everything okay? She stared at the screen, waiting. Tammy finally responded 10 minutes later. It went great. I'll tell you everything later. Love you. Amy exhaled slowly, some tension loosening in her chest. But across town, another message was lighting up a phone. Not Tammy's. Not Amy's. Chris's. It was from his doctor. Your test results are in. Please schedule a follow-up. As soon as possible. His stomach twisted. 3 siblings. 3 secrets. all moving toward a moment none of them could avoid. Morning light spilled over Dixon again, but the tension in the Sllayton household had not eased. Amy sat at the kitchen table, her laptop open, fingers hovering over the keyboard. She wanted to write a post, an explanation, a defense, maybe an apology, but every word felt like it would be judged, twisted, or misinterpreted. Gage climbed onto her lap, holding a toy dinosaur, while Glenn reached out from his playpen, squealing. The kids were a grounding force, yet Amy felt the weight of every mistake, every judgment, every rumor surrounding her. Tammy was across town, stepping out of her car with Andrea by her side. The animal shelter awaited, but so did new challenges. Today, she would meet a family hoping to adopt a dog. Tammy had never been in a position where someone relied entirely on her decisions for another life. Responsibility was different now, not just about her health, her body, her independence, but for others. She tightened her grip on the leash of a small brown terrier, feeling a thrill she hadn't experienced in years. The dog nudged her hand, tail wagging, and for a fleeting moment, she forgot the drama, the fights, the media scrutiny. Meanwhile, Chris sat at the kitchen table, his phone pressed to his ear. He had called the doctor's office 3 times this morning, trying to get clarity. His heart raced each time the receptionist said, "Please hold." Finally, he got through. The doctor's voice was calm, but serious. "Chris, there are irregularities. I want to run more tests before we make any conclusions." Chris nodded, swallowing hard. "I understand. Thank you." He hung up and exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of fear pressing down on his chest. He needed to stay strong for his sisters, for himself, but inside, he felt as if the ground had shifted beneath him. Back at Amy's, she had managed to draft a short note for social media. She hesitated before posting, rereading each word, deleting phrases, adding others. Finally, she hit send. "I'm doing my best, and I'm getting help. Thank you for caring about my family." She let out a shaky breath, hoping the world would understand. She wanted privacy, but also transparency. Tammy returned home later that afternoon, exhausted but triumphant. She collapsed into her recliner, Andrea adjusting her blanket and offering a cup of water. "How was it?" Andrea asked softly. Tammy smiled, tired but proud. "It was amazing. I didn't know I could feel so useful. I didn't know I could feel this normal." She paused, looking out the window at the golden Kentucky sky. "It's like I'm finally becoming someone I recognize. Someone I like." The sisters texted briefly, updates bouncing between them like small lifelines. Amy shared a picture of Gage building a tower of blocks. Tammy replied with a photo of the brown terrier she had walked that morning, wagging its tail at the camera. The smallest connection reminded them they were still tethered together, despite the arguments, the jealousy, and the misunderstandings. Chris arrived that evening, carrying groceries and a heavy sense of concern. Amy greeted him with a small smile, the kind that tried to hide the exhaustion beneath. "Hey," she said softly. Chris dropped the bags on the counter. "Hey, sis." He hesitated, searching her face for signs of stability. "Everything okay?" Amy shrugged, trying to appear casual. "As okay as it can be." Tammy wheeled herself into the living room, joining them. The 3 siblings settled on the couch, the air thick with unspoken words. Finally, Chris spoke, the weight of the doctor's call looming. "Guys, I think we need to talk. It's serious." Amy and Tammy exchanged worried glances. Fear tightened in their chests. Whatever came next, it was going to demand every ounce of courage, every bit of resilience. Later that night, the house was quiet. The boys were asleep, the lights dimmed. Amy and Tammy sat together, shoulders touching. "We've been through so much," Amy whispered. Tammy nodded, her hand brushing over her sister's. "And we'll get through this too." A moment of fragile peace settled between them, a reminder that even amid chaos, love could endure. But outside, the wind picked up, rustling the trees with an eerie whisper. Change was coming, inevitable, unpredictable, and relentless. Each of them knew it, but none could fully prepare for the storm that lay ahead. As Amy stared at the ceiling, she whispered to herself, "I'm ready to fight for me, for my boys, for Tammy." Tammy mirrored the sentiment quietly. "I'm ready too." Together, they braced for the unknown, hearts tethered by family, love, and the unshakable bond that had carried them through every trial so far. Whatever tomorrow held, they would face it united, stronger, braver, and more determined than ever. The sun rose over Dixon, Kentucky, painting the town in shades of gold and pink. The Sllayton house buzzed with a quiet urgency, a mixture of anticipation and nervous energy. Amy carefully packed the last of Gage and Glenn's bags, double-checking that nothing essential was left behind. Each item was a small testament to her care, her dedication to her children, and her determination to reclaim control over her life. She paused for a moment, watching her boys play, their laughter a balm to her frayed nerves. Tammy wheeled herself into the hallway, Andrea steadying her side. Today was another step, another chance to redefine herself. She had learned the strength of patience, the value of self-discipline, and the power of resilience. The loose skin removal had been just the beginning. Each day now offered a new opportunity to assert her independence, to chart her own course, to embrace the life she had fought so hard to achieve. She felt anticipation flutter in her chest, a mixture of excitement and fear, the same combination that had marked every major milestone of her journey. Chris arrived with a pile of last-minute supplies, snacks, water bottles, and a carefully folded map of the travel route. His face was lined with worry and exhaustion, but there was also pride. He had watched his sisters grow through some of the most difficult years of their lives, witnessing battles with weight, health, addiction, and family drama. Now, standing in the living room, he realized how much they had accomplished, how far they had come. As the vehicle doors closed and the engine roared to life, a strange serenity settled over the sisters. Amy held Gage's hand tightly, while Glenn clutched her other arm. Tammy's eyes met Andrea's, a quiet promise passing between them. Today wasn't just about a physical journey. It was a journey of healing, of trust, of reclaiming what had been lost to fear and circumstance. The road stretched before them, long and winding, symbolic of every challenge they had faced and overcome. Memories of arguments, tears, triumphs, and laughter flickered like passing scenery. The old resentments were still there, nestled in corners of their hearts, but alongside them existed compassion, understanding, and a profound acknowledgement of each other's struggles. Hours later, as they approached the rehab facility, Amy felt a lump in her throat. It was a place she had feared, a place of judgment, but also a place of potential renewal. Tammy beside her, quiet but resolute, gave her a reassuring squeeze. "We got this," Tammy whispered. Amy nodded, drawing strength from the bond they shared. Inside, the sterile scent of antiseptic did little to calm the tension. Amy was guided to a private room, the windows offering a glimpse of a tranquil garden outside. She sat on the bed, taking in deep, steadying breaths. This was a beginning, her own journey toward emotional stability, toward reclaiming her identity beyond the labels, beyond the mistakes, beyond the headlines. Tammy and Andrea watched from a nearby seating area, holding hands and speaking in soft tones. "She'll be okay," Andrea murmured, her eyes following Amy through the glass partition. Tammy exhaled slowly, feeling the culmination of years of struggle, sacrifice, and hope. "She's stronger than she knows," she replied. Meanwhile, Chris monitored the clock, the silence in the waiting room heavy with reflection. He thought back to the early days of 1000 LB Sisters, when life seemed insurmountable, when every step forward was a battle. Now, the sisters were walking into the next phase of their lives with courage, determination, and an unshakable familial bond. Hours passed. Amy emerged from her session, calmer, steadier, a quiet strength emanating from her posture. Tammy wheeled forward, tears brimming but a proud smile lighting her face. "Sis," she said softly. Amy embraced her, the hug long, tight, filled with gratitude and unspoken promises. "We made it," Amy whispered. "We're still together." Outside, The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parking lot. The Sllayton sisters and their family returned home, carrying the lessons of the day with them. Challenges would continue, conflicts would arise, and the media would still cast its gaze, but they had proven something fundamental: the power of love, resilience, and unity. Amy tucked her boys into bed that night, each small sigh of contentment a reward for her perseverance. Tammy returned to her recliner, Andrea at her side, both gazing out at the Kentucky skyline. The house, though filled with echoes of past chaos, felt warmer, calmer, imbued with hope. In the quiet of the night, the sisters reflected on their journey. Every pound lost, every argument endured, every tear shed had led them here, to a moment of fragile peace and renewed determination. The world beyond the walls of their home waited, unpredictable, relentless, but no longer insurmountable. Together, they had weathered storms, confronted demons, and forged a bond that would endure. And as the moon rose high above Dixon, casting silver light over the Sllayton family, there was a sense of anticipation, a quiet certainty. The best chapters of their story were still ahead. Through struggles, through laughter, through tears and triumphs, Amy and Tammy Sllayton remained unbroken, united, and ready to face whatever came next, side by side, stronger than ever. The next morning dawned crisp and bright over Dixon, Kentucky, as Amy awoke with a mix of excitement and trepidation. She moved quietly through the house, careful not to wake Gage or Glenn, her thoughts consumed by the day ahead. Today was another milestone, an opportunity to reclaim control, to prove to herself that progress wasn't just possible, but inevitable. She packed her essentials, double-checking diapers, snacks, and the small comfort items that made her boys feel secure. Tammy, still adjusting to the independence granted by her recent health breakthroughs, rolled herself into the living room with Andrea helping to steady her. The mobility scooter hummed softly, a reminder of the journey she had traveled. Each mile she had conquered, each step she had taken without fear, had built a foundation of resilience she now relied upon more than ever. Tammy glanced at her sister, noticing the quiet intensity in Amy's movements, the careful precision, the love woven into every gesture. Chris arrived, as he often did, with a mix of comic relief and supportive concern. He dropped off a few snacks, a water bottle, and a folded map of the route ahead. "Are we ready to conquer the world today, ladies?" he asked with a theatrical flourish. Amy laughed softly, shaking her head at his dramatics, but the warmth in his eyes betrayed his pride. He had seen his sisters battle unimaginable obstacles and was in awe of their tenacity. The family piled into the vehicle, the air thick with anticipation. Tammy kept her gaze fixed outside the window, remembering the days when simple trips to the store felt impossible. The sense of freedom was intoxicating, paired with the realization of how far they had come. Amy held Gage's hand tightly, while Glenn clutched her other arm, both children oblivious to the deeper emotional stakes but full of energy and curiosity. As the vehicle rolled forward, memories of past hardships, arguments, tears, victories, and failures flickered through their minds like passing scenery. The tension between the sisters, though still present, was softened by the shared understanding of their journey. They had been through so much together, and every moment now was a testament to their unbreakable bond. Hours later, they arrived at a new facility, one promising both guidance and support. Amy's heart raced as she stepped inside, the sterile environment both intimidating and hopeful. Tammy followed close behind, Andrea at her side, offering quiet reassurance. This was more than a physical journey. It was emotional, psychological, a chance to heal, to redefine priorities, to reclaim dignity and self-respect. Inside, Amy was guided to a private room. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a soft glow on the furniture. She took a seat on the edge of the bed, focusing on her breathing, trying to center herself. For months, the weight of stress, public scrutiny, and personal struggles had pressed heavily on her chest. This moment, small as it seemed, was a chance to exhale, to release some of the tension that had accumulated over time. Tammy and Andrea remained in the waiting area, whispering softly. She's going to be okay, Andrea murmured, sensing both fear and hope in the quiet moment. Tammy exhaled slowly, pride and relief mingling in her chest. She is stronger than she realizes, she said, her gaze steady and certain. Meanwhile, Chris kept a watchful eye from the corner, reflecting on the family's long journey. From the early days of 1000 LB Sisters, when every challenge seemed insurmountable, to now, he had witnessed growth, struggle, and triumph. The sisters had faced enormous obstacles, yet they continued to rise, armed with resilience, courage, and unwavering familial bonds. Time passed slowly, filled with silent anticipation. When Amy finally emerged from her session, a calm strength radiated from her. Tammy wheeled forward, eyes brimming with pride. They embraced, the hug long and tight, conveying gratitude, support, and unspoken promises. "We made it," Amy whispered. "We're still together." Outside, the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting a warm glow across the facility's grounds. The sisters returned home, each step symbolic of the challenges they had overcome and the growth yet to come. Life would continue to test them, but they had proven that together they could weather anything. That evening, the Sllayton home was calm. Amy tucked Gage and Glenn into bed, each small sigh a sign of contentment and accomplishment. Tammy relaxed in her recliner, Andrea beside her, both reflecting on the day's victories and the journey still ahead. Despite the challenges and lingering conflicts, the family had found a sense of peace, a renewed hope, and a promise of brighter days. As the moon rose over Dixon, the sisters reflected on the resilience that had brought them here. Every tear, every laugh, every step of progress had led them to this point, a place of empowerment, unity, and hope. Amy and Tammy Sllayton were not just survivors of circumstance. They were champions of perseverance, ready to face the next chapter, side by side, unbroken and unstoppable. The morning air in Dixon carried a quiet promise as Amy stirred from sleep, her mind still heavy with yesterday's revelations. She moved through her home with cautious determination, mindful of the weight of responsibility that lay upon her. Gage and Glenn stirred in their cribs, tiny murmurs of life that reminded her of the love she had fought so hard to protect. Amy's hands moved with purpose, organizing clothes, toys, and essentials for the day ahead. Every small task felt monumental, a testament to her growth and the challenges she had overcome. Tammy, already awake and stretching her arms from the recliner, glanced at her sister with a mixture of admiration and quiet amusement. Andrea stood nearby, offering gentle encouragement. Tammy's mobility scooter hummed softly, a symbol of her regained freedom and newfound independence. The sunlight streaming through the windows illuminated the room, highlighting the sisters' resolve, their shared determination, and the unspoken bond that had survived years of struggle and conflict. Chris arrived soon after, bringing his usual blend of humor and concern. "Ladies, are we ready to make history today?" he asked, his voice both playful and serious. Amy laughed softly, shaking her head at his theatrics, but the warmth in his eyes betrayed genuine pride. He had witnessed his sister's battle challenges that would have defeated most, and he knew this day would be no different. The family set off in the vehicle, the road ahead winding and familiar, yet imbued with new meaning. Tammy gazed out the window, reflecting on the journeys she had once thought impossible. Every step she had taken without fear, every mile she had conquered, had built a foundation of resilience that now guided her. Amy, holding Gage's hand tightly while Glenn giggled at the window, felt a similar sense of quiet triumph. The laughter of her children filled the car, a reminder of what she was fighting for and why she could not falter. The day's destination was a facility designed to support both physical and emotional growth. As they arrived, Amy's pulse quickened. The sterile environment was intimidating, yet hopeful, a space for transformation, healing, and self-discovery. Tammy followed closely, Andrea providing a steady presence at her side. The journey ahead was not simply physical, it was emotional, a chance to reclaim dignity and establish new routines that honored both health and happiness. Amy was guided to a private room, sunlight spilling across the furniture and warming the sterile space. She took a seat on the edge of the bed, letting herself breathe deeply. The weight of stress, public scrutiny, and personal struggle pressed heavily on her chest, yet in this quiet moment, she felt the first glimmer of relief. Tammy and Andrea remained just outside, whispering encouragement and reassurance. "She's going to be okay," Andrea murmured, sensing the mixture of fear and hope that hung in the air. Tammy nodded slowly, pride and relief reflected in her gaze. "Stronger than she knows," she replied. Chris lingered nearby, reflecting on the family's journey from the early days of 1000 LB Sisters to now. The sisters had faced unimaginable obstacles, weight struggles, health crises, emotional turmoil, but they had endured. Today was a milestone, a chance to demonstrate that perseverance and love could overcome adversity. Hours passed with quiet anticipation, filled with moments of reflection and gentle guidance from staff. When Amy finally emerged, a serene strength radiated from her. Tammy rolled forward, eyes brimming with pride. The sisters embraced tightly, a gesture filled with gratitude, forgiveness, and unspoken promises. "We're still together," Amy whispered. Tammy nodded, her eyes glistening. "Always," she replied. The sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the facility grounds as the sisters returned home. Each step was symbolic, a testament to the progress they had made and the challenges still ahead. Life would continue to test them, yet they had proven that together they could face any obstacle. That evening, the home was calm. Amy tucked Gage and Glenn into bed, each sigh a reflection of contentment and achievement. Tammy relaxed in her recliner, Andrea beside her, both soaking in the day's victories. Though conflict and tension remained, there was peace, hope, and a renewed sense of possibility. As the night deepened over Dixon, the sisters reflected on the resilience that had brought them this far. Every tear, laugh, and triumph had shaped them. They were no longer defined by their struggles alone, but by the strength and love that carried them forward. Amy and Tammy Sllayton were ready to face whatever came next, together, unbroken, and unstoppable. Morning light filtered gently through the curtains of Amy's home, casting soft patterns across the living room. The house was quiet except for the faint giggles of Gage and Glenn, who had already begun their morning routines. Amy sat on the edge of the couch, cradling a warm mug of coffee, her mind already racing with the day ahead. Today was not just any day. It was another step in rebuilding balance and reclaiming a sense of control. The weight of past mistakes still lingered, but with each passing moment, she felt stronger and more determined to move forward. Tammy was already awake, her recliner positioned to catch the morning sun. She stretched slowly, savoring the sensation of movement and the freedom that each day now offered her. Andrea had prepared a light breakfast and placed it within reach, ensuring that Tammy had the energy she needed for the day's activities. Tammy smiled at Andrea, a silent acknowledgement of gratitude and love. Despite the challenges they had faced, health struggles, surgeries, and the ever-present scrutiny from the outside world, they were finding their rhythm, one moment at a time. Chris arrived with his usual exuberance, bringing a little chaos into the calm morning. "All right, ladies, what adventures await today?" he asked, grinning as he set down a small bag of snacks for the kids. Amy chuckled softly, shaking her head at his theatrics, but the warmth in her eyes betrayed genuine affection. Chris had always been the bridge between laughter and guidance, and his presence provided both levity and reassurance. The family gathered briefly to discuss the plans for the day. Tammy had an appointment at the animal shelter, her first interview for a volunteer position that would give her purpose beyond the walls of home. Amy, on the other hand, had errands to run, including coordinating with wedding vendors and ensuring that her children's routines remained uninterrupted. The sisters exchanged knowing glances. While their paths were different, they moved in tandem, connected by shared history and unbreakable bonds. Amy helped Gage into his little jacket while Glenn tugged at her sleeve, seeking attention. She smiled through the fatigue, remembering how far she had come. Each small victory, from successful parenting moments to personal achievements in weight loss, was a testament to her perseverance. Tammy, watching from the recliner, allowed herself a moment of quiet pride. She had witnessed Amy's struggles, her breakdowns, and her moments of brilliance. Today, the air between them was heavy with unspoken acknowledgement of their shared resilience. The ride to the animal shelter was filled with conversation, punctuated by laughter and occasional teasing. Tammy leaned back in her scooter, Andrea at her side, while Amy navigated the car with practiced ease. Outside, the world moved at its usual pace, unaware of the personal victories and trials occurring within this small vehicle. For the sisters, each day was both ordinary and extraordinary, a series of challenges transformed into opportunities for growth, connection, and healing. Upon arriving at the shelter, Tammy stepped, or rather rolled, inside with determination. The staff greeted her warmly, recognizing her genuine desire to contribute and her commitment to personal growth. Tammy's nerves were tempered by excitement. This was a chance to assert independence, to connect with others, and to prove to herself that she could thrive outside of familiar comforts. Amy lingered at the doorway for a moment, pride swelling in her chest as she watched her sister step confidently into a new chapter of life. Meanwhile, back home, Chris handled Gage and Glenn with his usual combination of chaos and charm. He read stories, offered snacks, and kept them entertained while Amy focused on her own tasks. It was a balance they had all come to accept, the delicate dance of independence and interdependence, of nurturing and allowing space for growth. Hours later, Tammy emerged from the shelter, her expression a mixture of exhilaration and exhaustion. Andrea and Amy were waiting, and the three shared a quiet moment together, hands joined, hearts aligned. "You did amazing," Amy said softly, her voice filled with admiration. Tammy laughed, a bright, unrestrained sound that filled the air with joy. "We're just getting started," she replied, determination gleaming in her eyes. The drive home was calm, reflective. The sisters shared stories, planning future adventures, and celebrating small victories along the way. Each word, each gesture, reinforced the bond that had weathered storms, misunderstandings, and the pressures of public scrutiny. By the time they arrived home, the sun was low in the sky, casting a warm glow over Dixon, Kentucky. It was a reminder that, despite the chaos, despite the struggles, there was always a new day, a fresh chance to rebuild, to reconnect, and to thrive. That evening, as the house settled into quietude, Amy tucked her children into bed, their soft breathing a soothing rhythm. Tammy rested nearby, Andrea keeping a watchful, loving eye over them all. The day had been challenging, rewarding, and transformative. The sisters had faced both internal and external obstacles, yet they emerged stronger, united, and hopeful for what lay ahead. Tonight, Dixon was calm, and within that calm was the undeniable truth. Amy and Tammy Sllayton were survivors, warriors, and sisters first and foremost. The following morning arrived quietly, with golden sunlight spilling into the Sllayton home, illuminating scattered toys, clothes, and the remnants of breakfast. Amy moved with purpose, her movements deliberate but graceful. Today was another weigh-in, another marker of progress that had become as much a mental journey as a physical one. Gage tugged at her sleeve, his little face full of curiosity, while Glenn babbled happily from his playpen. Amy smiled, kneeling to hug them both. "We've got this, my loves," she whispered, her voice both reassuring and determined. Tammy had already prepared herself for the weigh-in. Her wheelchair positioned strategically, she reviewed mental notes and reminders, focusing on how far she had come. The memory of past struggles, the days she could barely stand, the long nights of pain and self-doubt, hovered at the edges of her mind. But they no longer held power. Today was different. Today, she was ready to face the scale with courage. Andrea sat beside her, offering steady support. Tammy squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her presence. Chris burst in with his usual theatrical flair, startling both sisters. "Ladies, brace yourselves for greatness. We're about to witness miracles." His voice was loud, over the top, yet filled with love and encouragement. Amy rolled her eyes but laughed, the sound light and genuine. "Chris, you're ridiculous," she teased, though the warmth in her voice betrayed her appreciation for his antics. The weigh-in began with Amy stepping onto the scale first. The tension in the room was palpable, each heartbeat echoing as Dr. Smith prepared to announce the results. Amy exhaled deeply, a mixture of anxiety and hope. 18 pounds, Dr. Smith declared, a proud smile on his face. Amy gasped, a squeal of surprise escaping her. She let out a laugh that quickly turned to tears of relief and joy. Tammy clapped enthusiastically, shouting, "Look at you, melting like snow in July." The moment was pure celebration, a tangible reward for months of dedication, perseverance, and emotional resilience. It was now Tammy's turn. She gripped the armrests tightly, her knuckles white. This moment carried the weight of countless challenges, surgeries, oxygen dependence, and the relentless journey of self-improvement. Dr. Smith announced the number, 42 pounds. Silence followed for a heartbeat before Tammy's eyes filled with tears. Amy leapt forward, hugging her sister so tightly she nearly toppled Chris in the process. "Tammy, that's incredible. You're unstoppable," Amy whispered, pride and love intertwined in her words. The family celebrated with a simple yet meaningful lunch in a nearby park. Chris brought his water with attitude. Tammy carried protein sandwiches, and Amy had fruit cups in hand. Under the shade of a sprawling tree, the sisters shared smiles, laughter, and quiet reflections on the progress they had achieved. It was more than numbers on a scale. It was about reclaiming autonomy, confidence, and a sense of self-worth. As the day wore on, the sisters discussed plans for the future. Amy considered joining a mom's dance class to build confidence and community, while Tammy set small goals, walking further without relying on her scooter and volunteering at the animal shelter regularly. Chris added his signature humor, declaring his own aspiration to be the healthy uncle who flexes at family BBQs. Despite the light-hearted banter, there was an undeniable sense of accomplishment, hope, and unity in the Sllayton household. Evening arrived, casting a warm amber glow over the home. Amy sat quietly on her front porch, sipping a mug of tea, the events of the day settling in her mind. Tammy wheeled herself nearby, Andrea by her side, the air filled with calm and a rare moment of stillness. The sisters shared a glance, unspoken words of support and love passing between them. They had faced trials, made mistakes, and endured public scrutiny, yet here they were, stronger, closer, and ready for the challenges ahead. As the sky deepened into twilight, the Sllayton sisters reflected on the past, their struggles, and their triumphs. Amy whispered softly, "We've got this together." Tammy nodded, her voice firm yet tender. "We always do." In that quiet, fleeting moment, the weight of the world seemed lighter, the future brighter. Together, they were unstoppable, and no challenge, no matter how daunting, could break the bond forged by love, struggle, and unwavering sisterhood. The next morning, a quiet anticipation filled the Sllayton home. Amy moved with careful purpose, carrying a mixture of excitement and nervous energy. Today marked the beginning of a new chapter, her journey into recovery, reflection, and self-discovery. Tammy watched her from across the room, a small smile tugging at her lips. She knew her sister's path wouldn't be easy, but she also knew Amy had the strength to persevere. Chris helped Amy with her bags, his usual dramatic flair softened by genuine concern. "You ready, kiddo? The world's waiting for you to shine," he said, clapping her on the shoulder. Amy inhaled deeply, nodding. "I'm ready. Time to face this head-on." The car ride to the rehab facility was quiet, filled with reflective thoughts. Tammy sat beside her, squeezing her hand for reassurance. "You're not alone, sis. We'll get through this together," she said, her voice steady and full of warmth. Arriving at the facility, Amy's heart raced. The building loomed before her, a place of healing, growth, and accountability. She checked in, guided to her room, and finally had a moment alone. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she gazed out the window. Sunlight filtered through the trees, and the world seemed calm, almost serene. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of possibility, a chance to reclaim control over her life and her choices. Tammy and Chris stayed nearby, providing support and encouragement. "This isn't the end, Amy," Tammy reminded her softly. "It's a beginning. You've got a whole life ahead, full of love, laughter, and progress. Just take it one step at a time." Amy nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I will. I owe it to myself, to my boys, and to everyone who's cared about me," she whispered. Over the coming weeks, Amy navigated the routines and therapies of the rehab facility. She faced her fears, worked through emotional challenges, and learned strategies to manage stress, temptation, and anxiety. Tammy checked in regularly, celebrating every small victory, every successful therapy session, every step forward in personal growth. The bond between the sisters, though tested, remained unbreakable, built on years of shared struggles and unwavering love. Meanwhile, life outside the facility continued. Tammy embraced her independence and responsibilities, balancing her work at the animal shelter with personal goals and her relationship with Andrea. Each accomplishment, no matter how small, reinforced her confidence and determination. The sisters' parallel journeys highlighted resilience, growth, and the importance of supporting one another through life's trials. Amy's final day at the rehab center arrived with a mixture of triumph and reflection. She packed her bags, feeling stronger, calmer, and more in control than ever before. Tammy and Chris greeted her at the entrance, their faces lit with pride. "Welcome back," Tammy said, pulling her sister into a tight embrace. "We've missed you, but we always knew you'd come out stronger." Amy smiled, the weight of past struggles lifting. She felt ready to return home, to her boys, and to the life she was determined to build. The lessons she'd learned about self-love, boundaries, and resilience would guide her every step. As the Sllayton sisters drove back through the familiar streets of Dixon, Kentucky, a renewed sense of hope filled the air. Together, Amy and Tammy reflected on the past, celebrated their victories, and prepared for the challenges ahead. Their journey was far from over, but one thing remained clear. No matter what life threw at them, the sisters would face it side by side. United by love, strength, and an unshakable bond, the Sllayton sisters were ready for whatever the future held, stronger than ever and ready to continue their story. The camera faded out on their smiling faces, capturing a moment of hope, resilience, and sisterhood that would linger in the hearts of viewers long after the season ended. For Amy and Tammy Sllayton, this wasn't just reality TV. It was life, growth, and the unwavering power of family.